we're going to find that on sunrise of winter solstice, December 21st, 2012, that our sun of our solar system directly aligns with the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, the central sun of our solar system, for the first time in 25,920 years. This is a vast cycle. This is how long it takes the sun to precess backwards through all 12 signs of the zodiac. It is a cosmic year. 25,920 years. A cosmic month, the period of time that it takes to precess backwards through one sign of the zodiac. This is a complete process of evolution of one whole cycle. It is, if we wanted to put it in computer terminology, rebooting the system. It's that the central source of life and light will align with the Earth and with our solar system and the sun in a way that hasn't happened for 26,000 years. It is a regeneration and a rejuvenation of the divine plan, because as we talk about laws of physics, one of those fundamental laws is the law of entropy. You create physical systems and they begin to decay. We're going to find that is the principle of death if we want to speak of it spiritually. And it is the being Ahriman, which is darkness. And it relates to Kali Yuga and the materialism and the darkness that has really been dominant, especially during the last 500 years. Within the Tzolk'in, within this calendar, they had identified this time that was April 21st, 1519, in their calendar as a very significant date. It was identified as a great coming. It had been identified for hundreds of years. That was the date that Cortez and his men arrived at Veracruz in Mexico. On that very date, April 21st, 1519. In fact, it was called the coming of the butterfly. There were 19 ships with their canvas sails billowing in the wind, and the Mayans thought, wow, this was a perfect fulfillment in terms of what it is that had been stated in prophecy. It began a time of 9 52-year cycles that were called the 9 hells, that began in 1519 and ended on August 13th, 1987. Now, the Mayans had known this. They knew this period of time was going to take place roughly 500 years. That there was this one event in 1519, and it was going to reach its culmination August 1987. Now, checking awareness here for people. Anyone know what that was? The harmonic convergence. I don't know how many of you were aware of this. This was Jose Argüelles popularizing this from his study of the Mayan calendar, where he came out with a series of books in terms of the incredible knowledge contained within the Mayan calendar and what it meant for the future. Amazing work. Here, this period of time was the ending of these 9 hells, or these 9 cycles of 52 years between the arrival of Cortez and the harmonic convergence. The harmonic convergence was the ending of this age of darkness and materialism, not completely, because we're still talking about the same calendar of December 21st, 2012. The intensity of that darkness and the beginning of the rising of the light. It's like if we talk about sunrise, we actually start seeing the light before we actually see the sun. That there is an increasing amount of light that we see happening, that the darkness is over, that the night is over. We can see the rising of the light, even though we still can't see the sun yet. In a metaphoric way, that is what the harmonic convergence was in terms of the Mayans. They would be saying that what has been growing since that time has been the rising of the light. If we look at the New Age movement, all these NGOs, all of this alternative stuff, all this grassroots stuff that we've been talking about, we start talking about the awakenings and about the social interaction at a grassroots level, begin to become conscious of, first of all, and then begin to address in a positive, creative way the problems and ills of society and the world. We're seeing a huge manifestation of this activity from this period of time. Not that nothing was going on before then. Of course there was. We're going to see an acceleration. Within the Mayan culture, the elders that are the repositories, they're called the day keepers. This knowledge is still very much alive. They identify this time as we have described it. The existing power structure, politically and economically, of the world is really controlled and held by the darkness. This is subjects that we've talked about in other classes, so I'm not going to get into it. But we're going to find with the rising light and the expanding awareness, people are awakening to the reality of exactly the world that we have created, how destructive it is, and how inhumane it is, whether we speak of it in terms of humanity or in terms of nature. Nature is very much alive and very conscious. This is a time of transition. This is that time when the rising light is challenging the darkness or the established structure, the power structure. This is what is happening. They basically are saying it is going to be happening from a grassroots level, and it is that people are awakening, and that they do need to join together in terms of coming up with alternatives, which is just exactly what's happening and what has been happening. Not to underestimate the power of the establishment of the darkness. Just as there's a spiritual hierarchy of light, there's a spiritual hierarchy of darkness. And we're going to find that those that are in power do not give up power easily. The darkness, or the shadow, if you will, has a clarity of its plan. If we put it in the context of the Mayan culture, what has just ended, or is in the process of ending, is what is known as the fourth sun. What we are moving into, in terms of December 21st, 2012, is the fifth sun. Again, this gets into more esoteric stuff that relates to the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, of which they have to do with cosmic energy and intelligence that takes particular forms, of which everything in creation is made. It gets deeply into alchemy, which has to do with the very magical nature of life and transformation itself, which is what we are all about and what life is all about. When they say the fourth sun, which is just ending, the element that ruled the fourth sun is the earth, which relates back to the earthy element, which relates to materialistic values, which relates to creating a materialistic culture and civilization. And before that was air, fire, and water. The fifth sun that we are moving into is the fifth element, which in the Western tradition is known as the etheric. If we talked about it in terms of Chinese tradition, the term in Chinese is qi. If we talked about it in the Vedic tradition, it is prana. And what those mean is the cosmic life force that is non-physical. It is etheric, that actually interpenetrates all the other four elements and all of life, and it's the animating life force of everything else, and it is consciousness itself. So it's saying in the Mayan calendar that we're moving from a materialistic age, the fourth sun, into the world of the fifth sun, which is etheric, which by definition is non-physical and spiritual, meaning an animating and an enlivening of human consciousness, human society, in a way that hasn't happened in this manner for vast periods of time, meaning there's a re-spiritualization, a regeneration, a re-enlivening that is beginning to unfold. And for those of you who are on the spiritual path, for those of you who do regular meditation and spiritual work, you are going to be conscious and aware of this growing enlivenment within your very being and within everything that surrounds you. It's real, it's tangible, it's here now. It's going to be increasing and growing in its influence and strength as we move more into the future. By its very nature, when we get into alchemy, which is a whole huge subject, it has to do with the art and science of transformation. When we add the element of the etheric to any combination of any other elements, we find a quickening and a transformative process that takes place that the only way that you can describe it is alchemical. A catalyzation takes place where the entire thing is transformed. If we talk about water, H2O, 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen, how do 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen result in this incredibly beautiful thing we call water? The very nature of life itself is magical. It's understanding how it works and how to work with it, and that is nature. One of the problems we have is that we do not honor nature. The ancients looked at nature as the book of life and the book of wisdom. They studied it from a perspective as a living book, not as some abstraction of dead matter. And as such, we will find contained within that of nature is all knowledge and all wisdom. But it depends upon our attitude of how we observe as to what we get out of what we observe. Because it has to be experienced with the heart. Not just the head, not just the intellect, not just the way that science approaches it. It must be connected through the heart. It has to be heart-based wisdom, not just head-based wisdom, not just the intellectual knowledge of science as we know it. There must be that love or that heart aspect that is part of this. Then what that allows is you, in your consciousness, to become one with that which is observed. Becoming one with it, we mean you actually are able to experience it from the inside out and know it for what it is, not as an observer separated from it as some separate thing, but actually to, in an experiential living way, experience it in its true nature and its true soul and its true being and know it for what it truly is. That is true knowledge. That is true wisdom. And that is how the ancients would experience nature. And that's how nature would reveal her secrets to humanity that were contained in the ancient traditions. That is as available to us today as it has been in the past. This has everything to do with this rising of the etheric, because the etheric is non-physical. It is that which binds everyone and everything together. It is spiritual in its very nature. Here we're moving into a more rarefied time, a time of higher vibrational frequency when we speak of the etheric. When we look at this from that standpoint, as we have talked about before, in terms of this 2,160-year period, which is the period of time that it takes the sun to precess backwards through one sign of the zodiac, that times 12 is the 25,920 years that we just talked about in terms of this Mayan calendar that's being completed on December 21st, 2012. If we break that down by months of this cosmic year, a month of a cosmic year is 2,160 years. It's the period of time that it takes the sun to precess backwards through one sign of the zodiac. If we then take that 2,160-year period and divide it into seven, the 7 days of the week, or the 7 primary archangels of the 7 sacred planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, of which there's an archangel or being that rules each one of those planets and expresses through each day of the week, and we can speak of it in a much more living way in terms of time. That every one of those archangels in a 2,160-year period has a roughly 300-year period of regency or rulership to where it guides evolution for that period of time. Since 1879, Archangel Michael is that being that has been the regent or spirit of the time of our current evolution and continues for quite some time. Archangel Michael is the archangel of the sun. When we start talking about the sun, it's aligned with the things that we were talking about, that our sun is aligning with the central sun of the Milky Way galaxy, of our galaxy for the first time in 25,920 years. And I should add, what appears if we see it, it has to do with our sun on the ecliptic, which has to do with the horizon line, if you will, that is from our viewpoint as a solar system, with the ecliptic of, or the same level of the horizon as the central sun of our Milky Way galaxy. It's taken 26,000 years for our solar system to orbit around the central sun of our galaxy. So we have completed this process and come back, and it's the new beginnings and rebirth. What it forms, if we look at it, is like a cosmic cross. This cross, in the spiritual traditions, the Mayan spiritual traditions, even the Western spiritual traditions, is known as the Tree of Life. And when we get into esoterically understanding the Tree of Life, which is really the source, and we get into Adam and Eve and the whole thing of the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, and falling out of the garden, which gets into all kinds of other things. But it has to do with us as spiritual beings moving our evolution from the spiritual worlds into the material worlds of physicality and of earth, which is defining our time here in terms of experiencing materiality. This Tree of Life, or the cross, this cosmic cross, when we start talking about the cross, it's a universal symbol that we can go into any culture and civilization and get into very deep stuff about. We're going to find in present-day culture that it has very much to do with the Christ being. And the Christ being is the creator being of our universe. And we're going to find that this being came from the central sun. And this being incarnated into humanity and human evolution 2,000 years ago. And it's not left. This being is still here. And it's in the process of raising the consciousness of humanity and the earth to Christ consciousness. This is the being of life. This is the being that is your higher spiritual self. This is the being that is that part of you which is about self-realization and enlightenment. We are going to find that since 1932, esoterically, the second coming of the Christ has been happening, and it lasts for a 3,000-year period. And Archangel Michael, the right hand of the Christ being, is that being that is preparing the way for this rise in consciousness that is this Christ consciousness. Now, the fundamentalist Christians don't understand. They're thinking that there's going to be a physical incarnation of the Christ. We're not talking about Jesus. We want to understand. Jesus was a human being. He was a master. He was the one who provided the physical vehicle for the Christ being to enter at the time of the baptism in the Jordan. The Christ being is the creator being of our universe and the higher spiritual self, or the basis and foundation of self-awareness that each and every one of us has. And we've come to a time where Christ consciousness or enlightenment or self-realization is the program that is activated with the being of enlightenment on this earth. We could get into, it's been the topic of many other classes, why did the creator being of our universe choose to incarnate in human evolution on planet Earth, some distant solar system of the Milky Way galaxy, of all of the various worlds and life waves of evolution that it could have incarnated into. And it's because of the central importance of what happens in human evolution and on planet Earth for the entire creation. What is happening here, for all kinds of reasons, very much about freedom and love, has to unfold within human evolution for the benefit of the entire cosmos. We are going to find that it is of such magnitude of what is going on within the human soul, individually and collectively, and within human society and this planet Earth, that this being needed to intervene, if you will. And this would relate to the Michael class, also the Spirit of the Times class, and also the first and second coming of the Christ class. At the time of the incarnation of the Christ being came to the sun, descended through all these layers of creation, came to our sun, and basically was there for several thousand years before it actually incarnated into humanity, into Jesus, the human being, and Jesus, the Christ, or more technically correct, Christ Jesus. This being was created and had a 3-year period of its teaching and activity from the baptism in the Jordan to the crucifixion on the cross. At the crucifixion, this being didn't leave. It actually has been in the process of transforming this earth and human consciousness ever since. This other factor, Michael was the one who prepared the way for the incarnation of the Christ that period of time over 2,000 years ago. When an archangel has finished its regency of guiding evolution, it must go back to its planet. It's still involved, but it must step into the background while the next archangel comes to the foreground in order to guide evolution in terms of its particular qualities and what human evolution or evolution in general needs. So Michael had to retreat back to the sun after his regency was completed. And Michael as a cosmic being is the regent of the cosmic intelligence, or the universal principle of creative intelligence, or the mind of God. Everything is mind, everything is consciousness, everything is intelligence. There is nothing that isn't. We are going to find that for humanity to unfold its destiny of freedom and love, and that which we would call self-realization and cosmic consciousness, that it was necessary for Michael to release the control of the cosmic intelligence from the sun and allow it to descend to the earth and enter into human souls and enter into human consciousness, so that ultimately every single one of us would be the living embodiment of the cosmic consciousness and have the freedom and the love in order to give expression to that cosmic intelligence in a totally unique individual manner, which defines in very abstract way enlightenment. Because our purpose, our greater purpose, humanity, collectively and individually, are to be conscious co-creators with God for the completion of the divine plan. We have to come into a state of self-realization. We have to come into a state of awareness to where we really have those abilities available to us, and we've established and aligned ourselves consciously in freedom through free will choice with this source, with this light, and actually embody it for us to be capable to correctly become conscious co-creators and the fulfillment of the divine plan. For that to take place, Michael had to release the cosmic intelligence from the sun, allow it to settle into human consciousness, and allow mankind in freedom to work with this cosmic intelligence without his guidance, without Michael's guidance. Now, this gets into the other factor, which again is really not the topic for tonight, but it is that the being of darkness, Ahriman, his home is in the earth, utilized this period of time to be able to influence human intelligence, this cosmic intelligence in humanity, in a way to express this intelligence in terms of creating a materialistic culture. A culture devoid of spirit, basically that which would be represented by science. If you can't weigh it or measure it or touch it or taste it, it doesn't exist and it isn't real. Science is defining that the only reality is physical reality, and that anything that is non-physical is not real. And that is part of our culture and civilization. That is based in this Ahrimanic dark utilization of the cosmic intelligence to focus it and limit it in a manner that we are using this intelligence just in physical, material ways and means, and as a result have material values and create a culture and civilization that's based in materialism. Now, what is awakening? Michael's regency, for the first time in 2,160 years, began in 1879. Just as he was the preparation for the first coming of the Christ, he is now the preparation for the second coming of the Christ. The second coming of the Christ is an inner, etheric, spiritual event. This being is not going to take incarnation in a physical body. No, it's already done that. Now this being is in the etheric, spiritual worlds, and this being is very much present and alive in what is going on. The beautiful thing is that 2,000 years ago, during the first coming of the Christ, this being was localized in a physical body, the physical body of Jesus. It was in a backwater of the Roman Empire, Israel, where very few people had any contact or involvement with this event or with this being. As of its death, and not being confined by a physical body, this being is available for everyone, anywhere, anytime. It's omnipresent. And it works through the etheric heart. When we talk about this fifth sun that we're moving into, there's the physical heart. When we have to have a heart operation, we go in on a cardiologist to say there's 4 chambers to the heart. Well, there's actually 5. The 5th chamber of the heart is the etheric aspect of the heart, and in the ancient traditions of the Vedic tradition, it's known as the cave of the heart. It has to do with the spiritual experience of entering deeply into the heart and soul of oneself in a spiritual manner, to where one really connects with the very source of life itself, and becoming established in that experience of this heart-based wisdom and consciousness is the basis of unfolding cosmic consciousness and of Christ consciousness and of enlightenment. Where the activity of the Christ being is active in each and every one of us at the present time and for the next 3,000 years is in the heart. We're going to find that the opportunity for every single one of us to have a personal, direct, conscious relationship with the Christ being is open to each and every one of us. We must choose to do it. It doesn't happen automatically. It's in other things that we have talked about in previous classes, where up to 2,000 years ago, evolution happened to us. It happened to us in an unconscious manner. As of the Christ event, evolution does not happen to us anymore. We must do it to ourselves. We must do the work. We must take the responsibility to grow and evolve ourselves, which means that we have to take responsibility. We have to make choices. There can be the choices in terms of really cultivating those heart qualities or not. There can be those choices as to whether we really develop the spiritual aspects of our being, which is really what this time is all about. And it is about the shift that takes place. And it isn't the denial of the material. It's the enlivening of the spiritual, which is the basis of the material, because there's nothing that isn't spiritual. Even darkness is light. Even darkness is light. When we talk about the darkness, when we talk about shadow, it's still the light. We're seeing a confrontation here between the darkness and the light. And they both need each other. There are polarities, like masculine and feminine, positive and negative, day and night. You can't have one without the other. It's finding the correct balance and harmony and establishing the right relationship between these forces and powers that has to do with the times in which we are in. It has been a time where the darkness has been dominant, so the rising light is a real change in the dynamics of life itself. The darkness has its agenda. It knows what is going on. It is very focused and it's very clear. If you want to really understand the manual, the book of darkness, read Machiavelli's The Prince. You're going to find that one of the basic principles of it is divide and conquer. Or to the degree that we can keep people divided and fighting amongst themselves, they won't be able to come together to do what needs to be done. That's the basis of this divisiveness, this polarization. That isn't just in our country, it's all over the world. That we've seen increasing to where there can't even be a reasonable dialogue or possibility of communication between these politicians. They're talking at each other. They're not listening. They have no desire to come off of their high horses and try to create a solution. Or else we would have them stepping forward in terms of creating solutions because they can't. They're refusing. They're not doing it. We want to understand that the forces of divisiveness are very strong, but also it's one of the reasons that we were giving the example of these NGOs, these grassroots organizations of people coming together at community friend group level to form centers of movement, of action, of addressing issues and ills. That is the answer. What we're finding through the new technology, the internet, when we look at Facebook and we look at these various things and we look at the Arab Spring and we look at the Occupy Wall Street, or we look at the Tea Party, we look at any of these, we're going to see that the new technologies are creating means for disparate peoples, unconnected peoples all around to be able to connect. And connect in a way that they become a force, that they become a power to be reckoned with, to address the established forces of power. Look at Mubarak in Egypt. Look at Gaddafi in Libya. This is going to be increasing. It is going to be from this grassroots level. It is this awakening. And it is the people recognizing that they are dissatisfied, that something is very wrong and something needs to be done. Just the expression of that is something that is going to be scary to the people in power. We want to have this perspective that we're moving into the age of light, that we are in the rulership of the spirit of the times of the Archangel Michael, the Archangel of the Sun, that we are in this time of the second coming of the Christ, which is the opening up to Christ consciousness on an individual and collective level, the opportunity to create a whole new culture and civilization based upon a whole new consciousness. And yes, no question, there's a time of transition, it's a time of change and dislocation. That, then, are the things that we are going to be having to deal with in a practical way. This, to give the perspective, things are going to get more intense before things settle out. And in a practical way, we need to be aware of this and where things are going and why. The paradigms are changing. The old paradigm of capitalism is going to be changing from the standpoint that it has to incorporate more heart and soul. It has to incorporate more humaneness. And there's many corporations out there that are doing it on their own. But also, there's going to be centers of resistance that are going to resist this change, and there is going to be turmoil. That's part of what we are going to be seeing in the future. It's very important that we have this perspective and that we know what is going on and why. One of the things that has to change, two of the things that are the basis of the kind of change and transformation that we were talking about are change in our relationship with each other as human beings, meaning that we really honor and recognize each other and we are there for each other. From a practical standpoint, you want to create for yourselves your own support groups. Those people with skills and friends that are able to do all kinds of things. So when you come together, there's somebody who can deal with legal stuff, people that can deal with health stuff, there's people who can deal with financial stuff, people that can deal with food stuff. It is going to be forming these support groups at grassroots level that will give us the basis of creating a new society, and if necessary, because it doesn't have to be this way, but if things do completely fall apart, we've got that structure in place to where we're fine. It doesn't have to happen that way. It's only to the degree that the people in power resist the change. is the degree to which it will be messy or not messy. I guarantee you the change is inevitable. The degree of resistance to that change is going to be the factor as to how smooth or not smooth the process will be. Time will tell. We are to come together to create new community at our local levels and even at global levels. That's what I mean about these NGOs. It has become a global community because of the technology, because of the shared values and the shared ills and the shared issues and the shared coming together in terms of change. We can be working together with people from India and China and Europe and South America and Africa and anywhere else because the needs are universal. The globalization that's taken place economically has created the same situations globally in terms of the pillaging of the earth and the degradation of mankind. You want to understand that international corporations are just in a modernized model perpetuating colonialism, which has to do with extracting the wealth of the people and the country and bringing it back in a concentrated form to the banks, which become centers and concentrations of power. International corporations are a colonization of the entire world. In that process, they despoil the people. They are looked at as a resource, as a labor resource, and they look at the natural resources of nature. What has to happen is a change in our attitude and interrelationships with each other as people, that we're human beings, that we're spiritual beings, that we are to be honored for who and what we are in terms of truth and love and beauty and justice and creativity and freedom. These are cosmic laws and principles and forces and powers. They're not abstractions. Every one of those words that I used is actually a living cosmic being that is a part of who you are and is a part of the cosmic consciousness that we're talking about that you unfold in terms of that process of self-realization, that each one of us is perfecting within our own personal consciousness that principle of truth, that principle of love, that principle of beauty, that principle of creativity, that principle of freedom. We could go on and on and on. This is what life is all about, the blossoming and flowering of these cosmic qualities of consciousness into the creating of a heaven on earth. We got some work to do. It's also our relationship with nature. Nature is a living being. It's the goddess, it's the divine mother. Within every plant, within every rock, within every stream, within every insect, within every cloud is life. These are the spiritual beings, the elementals, the nature spirits, the devas. There is not a single thing that is not ensouled, that is not alive, that is not conscious. And to the degree that we just grab, how did the Native Americans relate to the earth? And in fact, that is the destiny of this country. It isn't really the topic here. The attitude of the Native Americans to this earth, one of the things that we have to be, especially if you've lived and traveled at all extensively, as I have from foreign travel in the world, one of the things that you will be very, very impressed about is the natural beauty, the natural wonder of this country. We have been gifted one of the most beautiful places on the planet in terms of nature. It is just awe-inspiring. And what do we do with it? We're raping and pillaging it. We have no sense of the life, the sacredness that is inherent within every one of those grains of sand and within every flower and every animal. And the Native Americans were the custodians of this beautiful land. We are going to find as a country, as we evolve through this process of transformation that I'm talking about, become that center for the world consciousness of bringing that attitude of the Native American, of man's relationship with nature, of honoring and asking before we grab, and giving gratitude when we take, that a process of giving and receiving, we are going to find that we create a human culture and civilization of the right relationship between humanity and nature that the whole world needs. And it has been gifted to us by the very land that we live in and by the Native Americans, but it will be what is related in terms of this growing consciousness that is evolving within us at this time. And it is demanded that we establish a new relationship between humanity and nature. And that we establish a new relationship between humanity and humanity, or mankind, and each and every one of us. And this in a practical way, to the degree that we move into developing our consciousness and really establishing right relationship with each other. One of the things, I don't really like the news, but I often watch NBC News at the time I'm getting ready to make dinner, is at the end of every newscast, they have this segment about making a difference. I think it is so good. And every day they're showing how regular people, just like ourselves, are moving forward on their own initiative to step forward into society to help in a totally selfless way. That is the prototype. That is what is unfolding at this time. It has to do with the recognition of the humanity of each and every one of us and opening of our hearts. This is the practical aspect of opening up our hearts and doing our heart work, is love. And having that experience that we are all one, and what I do to you, I actually do to myself. And another principle, the more you give, guess what? The more you get. Cosmic law. These things are happening all around us on a daily basis, and this is the trend of time. This is where things are going. Something good is happening, folks, but there's going to be some bumps. It's going to be a bit of a wild ride. Know that you've chosen to be here now on purpose, because in human evolution, there has never been a time of so much opportunity for spiritual growth and evolution for humanity individually and collectively as the present time. We live in a very exciting time. Take advantage of it. Thank you very much.